Wow, that's all I can really say. What an amazing episode. I'm talking cinematography, acting, pacing, and above all, payoff. We've got a lot to unpack here, so without further ado, let's get into it.
She's alive.
The episode begins in the birthing cabin, where Mark's Innie and Outie communicate via camcorder. Outie Mark, along with Devin and Cobell, reveal the plan to rescue Gemma from the testing floor and expose Lumen for kidnapping. Innie Mark is shaken. He fears reintegration would erase him, and since Helly can't reintegrate, it would also mean losing her. Cobell then explains to Innie Mark how to get to the testing floor. When Mark mentions Irving's drawings, Cobell looks surprised, realizing the MDR team knows more than she thought, which raised a question for me. Will Cobell reach out to Irving? Will she be the one to bring him back in the next season? Or now that she's guessing how much he discovered, she might see him as an asset or a threat. And the reason I say asset or threat is because we don't know Cobell's true intentions still. Meanwhile, Helly is still with James Eagan, who creepily tells her he now sees Keir in her, not Helena. He also admits to having multiple secret children, but none lived up to his expectations. Helly doesn't back down. She threatens him, but James simply says,
"Tomorrow is a special day."
And vanishes. Now what if James doesn't just want Helly to carry on the Eagan legacy ideologically? What if he wants her to carry it on biologically? If Helly is pregnant with Mark's child, and if Helena is no longer considered a viable heir, then Helly could be James' only shot at continuing the Eagan bloodline. His sudden, obsessive focus on her might not be about admiration at all. Also, James now confirmed he has had multiple children. Now I'm not gonna give this idea a rest until I find out what's really happening. And I could be proven wrong, I don't care, I just want to know. Could Rickon be one of them? Rickon definitely doesn't scream Keir in the way James defines it, which might explain why James never saw it in him. But if James has multiple shadow offspring scattered across the outside world, Rickon's unexplained connection to Lumen and his really odd but maybe even sincere philosophical outlook might not be accidental. And also, could Drummond be one of his children? Back at the birthing cabin, Innie Mark watches a video from his Outie apologizing for creating him. Mark S responds, making it clear he doesn't want to be erased. When asked to trust his Outie, he replies,
"No."
Which brings me to a question for all of you, because honestly, I felt really bad for Innie Mark. Who has the right to exist? The one who has lived a full life? Or the one born in confinement who still makes something meaningful out of it? And yes, we can say Innie Mark's life is limited to the severed floor, or the birthing cabin in this case, but it's still his life. Also, I want to believe that Devin has Innie Mark's and Outie Mark's conversation. If yes, there is a possibility of her leaking it. Knowing Devin, I wouldn't be surprised. But this is where my mistrust of Cobell comes in. Will she try and stop it to protect her legacy? The next day, Mark S returns to the severed floor. A new propaganda painting titled The Exalted Victory of Cold Harbor hangs. Now, I want to talk about this painting a bit. Not only because it's creepy, but because of Miss Casey's placement. Miss Casey, aka Gemma, is positioned to Mark's left, not his right. On his right side, his MDR family, the people he bonds with in his Innie life and also Outie life. But Miss Casey is placed opposite. It's as if Lumen is marking the divide, Innie life versus Outie grief, or maybe it's emotional truth. Innie Mark doesn't know her like he knows the others, but then he doesn't really know Rickon or Devin except that one meeting at the end of season 1. So it still doesn't make sense to me as to why they would place her, and specifically Miss Casey, not Gemma. Then Helly arrives and they head to the MDR. In the MDR office, there is a spotlight on a wax animatronic doll of Keir holding a congratulatory note. Helly and Mark head to their desks for Mark to finish the Cold Harbor file. Then we hear a ding. Dylan returns, only to find out that his Outie has deferred a decision on his resignation request to his Innie. Mark and Helly complete the Cold Harbor file and Milchick arrives. Milchick and Keir give a speech, which turns into a roast of Milchick for using big words again, and then Milchick throws shade at the robotic Keir.
The legacy you've left behind is truly and irrefutably larger
in life.
You mean my company?
I mean this wax statue that's 5 inches taller than you actually were.
To which RoboKeer replies,
Thank you for that feedback, Seth.
and this right here brings me to a detail that I completely overlooked. The iceberg photo in Milchick's office. We've seen it before, and it's definitely not hard to view it as metaphorical. What we see from Milchick, the calm demeanor, the rules, the loyalty, it's just the tip. Below the surface, there's more. Resentment, fear, maybe even doubt. Could he turn or at least break further in season 3? Then comes the marching band to celebrate. Mark and Helly are surrounded by the C&M department. That's when everything sets in motion. Helly distracts Milchick and locks him in the bathroom. Dylan returns to MDR and helps block the door. Mark starts running to the testing floor. Meanwhile, Gemma is sent into the Cold Harbor room, and her task is to dismantle the crib Mark had built. On the surface, it seems meaningless, but this isn't just any piece of furniture. It's the crib Mark built for the baby they never had, a symbol of both hope and grief. And now Lumen is watching to see if her Innie self will break down at the sight of it. She doesn't. James and Dr. Mauer see this as proof that the chip is working. Meanwhile, Lauren delivers a goat to Drummond for a sacrificial ritual meant to guide Gemma's spirit. This is where something interesting happens. Lauren looks at the goat and then quietly asks,
How many?
How many what?
How many more must I give?
It's possible she's done this dozens of times. I could be wrong. But the show seems to subtly hint that the scenario between Mark and Gemma may have played out before. Different people, different MDR, different Milchick, or maybe it's all happening simultaneously in parallel tests. Now, if Cold Harbor isn't a unique experiment but a repeating pattern, that opens the door to something much larger and much more horrifying than we ever imagined.
Emil thanks you.
Then, when Mark tries to access the exports hall, Drummond attacks him, Lauren intervenes, and Mark takes Drummond hostage. In the elevator down to the testing floor, Outie Mark transitions in and accidentally kills Drummond with the bolt gun. Outie Mark finds Gemma and convinces her to leave with him. They reunite and run, but once back on the severed floor, Miss Casey and Innie Mark take over. They run to the exit, Miss Casey walks in, the door closes, and now it is Outie Gemma. Outie Gemma pleads for Mark to come with her, but then he sees Helly and chooses to stay. The episode ends with Mark and Helly running into the unknown, while Gemma leaves into the outside world alone, and the screen fades to red. And our adrenaline is replaced with something else. Questions. And a lot of them. What happens to Gemma now? She's all alone, back in the real world, and if Devon isn't waiting for her outside, if she doesn't find help fast, Lumen will come for her. Let's not forget, she's their most important experiment. She was never meant to leave the building, let alone regain her memories outside of the testing floor. Now she's a loose thread with too much knowledge, and Lumen doesn't let loose threads hang for long. I really hope once Gemma exits, Devon will be there, because if she's not, I don't even want to think about what might happen next. Now, what about Mark and Helly? Will Mark and Helly stay trapped inside Lumen, running, resisting, building their own quiet revolution from within? Or is there still a path out, through betrayal, breakdown, or some unexpected crack in the system? Now, if we believe that James now sees Helly, not Helena, as Lumen's future, maybe they won't be rebels at all. Maybe they'll be forced into a curated life on the severed floor, a twisted version of marriage, trapped but at least together. Which brings us to another big question. Was that really Helly at the end? Some fans think it might have been Helena, and if that's true, what happens to Innie Mark? Could Lumen replicate Cold Harbor, but for him? Build a new retreat, not to suppress Gemma's emotions, but to mold Mark's? Maybe the real experiment wasn't her, it was him. Even after learning the truth, Mark doesn't react the way Gemma did. No emotional fold and no rupture. Could grief have already done what Lumen wanted, just on the wrong subject? Now, something I truly hope they talk about next season, what is actually Cold Harbor? What does it really do? What was it for? We know what Cobell told us, that Cold Harbor is the culmination of a long experiment, one that involved Mark unknowingly building new innies for Gemma, file by file, through the data refinement process. Each file represented a new version of her, shaped around Kier's 4 tempers: woe, frolic, malice, and dread. Mark completed 24, Cold Harbor was the 25th, and then she's discarded. But what was the true goal? Why Gemma? Why sever her into dozens of emotional variants? Why stage her death? Why build her back into something Lumen could manipulate? We still don't have answers. Even the creators are keeping it pretty ambiguous. Ben Stiller said this: the Cold Harbor experiment, we don't quite know what the purpose of it is, but we do get a sense that Gemma has been severed into a number of different consciousnesses. It's something that's very important to Lumen, and what that is, I think we don't quite know yet. Dan Erickson added, we left some of it up to interpretation on purpose, because such a big part of the show has become the conversations that take place after the fact. Well, thank you, Dan Erickson. So for now, Cold Harbor remains a black box. What happens now that Drummond's dead? Drummond was more than just security. He was Helena's enforcer, Lumen's fixer, and the overseer of their ritual sacrifices. His death, even if accidental, is the first real body dropped in this war. Mark killed him, and now Mark is a liability. Now, I believe Drummond's death also shatters Lumen's command structure. We have Grainer, who's gone, Cobell, possibly flipped, Milchik, unraveling, and Drummond, dead. The walls are cracking, which means the company is about to get more dangerous than ever. And who will come into Drummond's place? This is where it becomes a little bit more interesting. If Drummond was the child of Jaime, how will Jaime take that? Will he be out for blood and revenge? That's very interesting to see how they explore that.
Oh, fuck.
Moving on, I want to talk about my favorite character who we unfortunately did not see in the finale, but whose absence felt intentional. Irv is still out there. Maybe he's still on the train. Maybe he's still digging for answers. And Cobell now knows he has paintings of the testing floor. That information alone makes him valuable and possibly vulnerable. Now, John Turturro, who plays Irv, told The Hollywood Reporter, "There's still so much we don't know about Irving, and yet so much that I already know. It feels like it's not the end for Irving, it's just a matter of when he comes back and what he's uncovered."
Okay, kids. Let's find out what's for dinner.
Well, my friends, that is it for today. We made it through Severance Season 2. This finale was intense, philosophical, deeply emotional, and it still, of course, left us with more questions than answers. But that's what this show does best. So now, I want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts, theories, and chaos in the comments down below. I want to thank everyone who took the time of day to watch or listen to this video. Don't praise Kier, and see you at the equator.